Hey guys, welcome back! DOS gaming grabbed my full attention back in 1989, in a time when I was all over arcades and still playing on my ZX Spectrum 128K plus 2A. Even so, by 1990, I opted for an Amiga 500 instead of a PC compatible, simply because the Amiga was still ahead and getting the best arcade conversions and original games. Since late 80s that I messed around with PCs at school, and was there that I eventually started to fall in love with that mysterious, technical and challenging environment. Only by the end of 1993, I went full steam into the wonderful world of MS-DOS personal computing with my own IBM PS1 486 DX2 66 MHz, mainly because I wanted to be a programmer. So, and for this video, I gathered 10 of my favorite games released back in 1989 that indeed grabbed my attention and made me lost tons of hours devouring every moment that I spent playing them at school and also over at friends' houses. And stay tuned, cause I'll be doing this for every single year since. And it will become harder and harder to choose just 10 games per year, I promise. So, let's take a look.
Arkanoid 2, Revenge of Doom.
Obviously that I had to point out the first game I ever played on a PC. The first Arkanoid was a huge addiction for me on my good old Specky, so I was all over its sequel, but now on a PC at school and on a part-time special class dedicated to introduce kids to the IT world, courtesy of the Portuguese government. Many of us were there just to play games, but we ended up also to learn about MS-DOS and computer hardware. Besides many other titles, Arkanoid 2 was played both on a Schneider Euro PC 2 and on another white-labeled compatible PC that used those huge 5¼ floppy disks. The DOS port was practically the last one to be released, alongside the one for the Apple II GS. All the other home computer versions were released during 1988. This DOS game was ported by Novalogic that I always associate with Comanche, that incredible helicopter sim. And what's more to say about Arkanoid 2 rather than it's a freaking addictive game, as I mentioned previously. Back in 1989, this was incredible to watch and play, and I felt so good to type MS-DOS commands to get the machine to understand the user. Only the ones who experienced it back in the day will comprehend that feeling.
The Duel Test Drive 2.
The Duel is the follow-up to the not-so-great Test Drive, and the first apparent change is the lack of cars, only 2 this time as opposed to 5 before. But there are now 2 modes of play, the traditional against the clock game or head-to-head against another car. The scenery has been totally redesigned with fields, deserts, mountain passes, tunnels and much more. Even the perspective view from the driver's seat has been lowered a little, which gives a better feeling when we're weaving through oncoming traffic. Speed is also essential in any car game, and boy, it is here, and the road scrolls far faster now, for 1989 standards that is. Accolade was more than proud of their new system, the expansion packs, nowadays known as paid DLCs. So each pack contained a disc and a manual, one containing the scenery for a Trans-California race, the other with 5 supercars. Each pack retailed at £11.99, and the next series of discs would contain even hotter stuff. The sound was improved too, and there are loads of extra touches, such as the cop who tries to flag us down. Brilliant stuff back in 1989, obviously.
The Cycles International Grand Prix Racing.
If you usually watch my content, you know that I absolutely love racing games with 2 or more wheels, so the Cycles was truly groundbreaking to me the first time I tried it. The chance to perform wheelies in this first-person view was so amazing to experience, even with this choppy frame rate. This sort of action viewed from the handlebars of our bike was a novelty for motorcycle racing games at the time. Everyone who experienced it was blown away. It includes all the tracks of 1989 Grand Prix motorcycle racing season, so it was awesome to be part of something like that. And being more of a simulator rather than an arcade game, if we crash, it's game over. We're simply and immediately out of the race. And to win each race, we must get through the finish line within a time limit. This was pretty hardcore stuff back then and for my younger self, and I loved it for that. It made me feel a grown-up dude. I was 14 years old by then, so I would try out all tracks and bikes available not only on championship mode, but also in both practice and single race modes. What a ride!
Bubble Bobble.
Bubble Bobble doesn't need any kind of presentation, simply because it's one of the most well-known games on Earth, and the DOS port is extremely faithful to the arcade original, surprisingly. In this one, two cute little dragons have eaten soap to be able to blow colorful bubbles at equally colorful enemies. The objective is to capture them inside those bubbles and then pop them. When we burst a bubble with an enemy trapped inside, it turns into a piece of fruit that we can eat for extra points. The goal of each level is to bubble all enemies and pop them. It's that simple. Just use the arrows and the Alt key, having also the chance to remap them to suit our needs. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated. It's just like those one-button joysticks we used to play on other systems. This game is just pure fun and an excellent way to pass some free time, trying to get as many points possible while enjoying the fun, colorful look of it and the cuteness of the characters. And there's no need for a fancy story or highly complicated plot. It really doesn't need one.
OutRun.
This MS-DOS conversion ported by Unlimited Software is a hell of a lot more impressive than the Amiga and ST versions that were converted by Probe Software. With similar sprite design, it bears a slight resemblance to the Sega Master System version, but runs at a much faster speed. All the features of the coin-op are present here: proper forks in the road to determine your route, plenty of traffic, a route map. Damn, you can even select your favorite coin-op tune at the start! We obviously would immediately relate that red car with the mythic Ferrari Testarossa. However, Sega had not licensed the likeness of Ferrari products and got into a series of legal issues with Ferrari. Only in OutRun 2 the red car would become an official Ferrari. Given the limitations of the PC's sound chip, the renditions of the coin-op's music aren't at all bad and lend a summery feel to the proceedings. All in all, an excellent conversion. It just goes to show what could be achieved when you really try. And by the way, Unlimited Software was the porting division of Distinctive Software, responsible for Test Drive 2 The Duel that I've placed 9th in this list. As for OutRun, please give it a try!
Space Quest 3, The Pirates of Pastulon.
Probably the second best graphic adventure from 1999, Space Quest 3. This time around, programmers Mark Crow and Scott Murphy have outdone themselves. It's not just the normal text and room descriptions that are wonderfully fresh. If you die in the game, you get a cynical comment, pleasantly shrill. Hats off to the graphics too. The animations are wonderful. The background graphics are detailed, and the characters are as bizarre as in a good comic book. The level of difficulty is pleasant, even if in some situations you can get further with persistence than with logic. But for instance, we can die in just the second screen we come to. There is a piece of metal that, if we try to pick it up, causes us to cut ourselves open and bleed to death without any warning whatsoever. The game supports mouse movement and a new, heavily improved text parser. Mouse movement was in a primitive state at the time of the game's release, so Roger is unable to automatically find his way around obstacles in the game world, instead stopping if he encounters a barrier. Computer mice were relatively new at the time, and Sierra's mouse movement would greatly improve in subsequent games. Still, Space Quest 3 is entertaining, lively and recommended for all science fiction fans.
Budokan, the martial spirit.
Now, and as for Budokan, it's a martial arts game covering karate, kendo, nunchaku and bo. We have a realistic range of moves and must use them wisely, as ki, the life force, is drained for every move made, whether successful or not, and both this and our stamina level must be kept high. We can practice our skills alone, or spar against instructors or our friends. Finally, when you feel you are ready, you can travel to the Martial Arts World Championship tournament at Budokan. We began as an apprentice in the Tobiko Ryu dojo and initially practiced skills in 4 dojos, either shadow fighting or sparring with an instructor. Finally, at the Budokan tournament, we'll face consecutive opponents equipped with various weapons or combat forms. During the tournament, the difficulty gradually rises, with each opponent demonstrating increasing prowess when compared to the previous. Most opponents are male, except for one female armed with an ajinata, the typical weapon of female warriors belonging to the Japanese nobility. So the gender of a ninjutsu opponent with a masked face is presumably female, as they are named Ayako. This one was as real as it would get back in the day, in what video games were concerned.
SimCity.
Whoever came up with a game idea for SimCity can give themselves a big pat on the back. The city simulation is one of the most fascinating and original PC games that have been released until that moment. The tingling feeling of playing comes mainly from the fact that the townspeople lead a life of their own. We set the general conditions within the framework of our financial possibilities, and the game presents the effects on the structure and size of the city, and we won't get tired of playing so easily, cause the disc contains 8 scenarios of different difficulty with finished cities. Experimenting with our own designs knows hardly any limits. Building a city is indeed a feat, but despite all that, SimCity doesn't really have much to offer, graphically speaking, and sound-wise for that matter. It's 1989 after all. The scrolling is jerky because of the few animations, and the sound effects are quite harsh. Even so, the color palette is beautifully colorful, and the various buildings are lovingly drawn. The viewing angle is slightly slanted from above, what ensures a good overview. The handling is exemplary, and we can set pretty much anything and everything through the menus. There's even a separate terrain editor that allows us to create our own landscapes and change existing ones. A fun fact is that because the game lacked any arcade or action elements that dominated the video game market during the 80s, most video game publishers declined to release the title for fear of its commercial failure. Only Brotherbund believed in Will Wright's little game and struck a deal with Maxis to distribute SimCity. And it really sold poorly initially, but positive reviews from the gaming press ended up boosting sales.
Indianapolis 500, the simulation.
I was blown away the first time I saw Indy 500 running. It really looks jerky and lifeless nowadays, but back in 1989, this was the next level in racing games and the birth of real driving simulators. Or maybe not. By 1986, Revs for the Commodore 64 introduced realistic driving behavior in a video game. Geoff Crammond was really ahead in this particular matter. Even so, the guys from Papyrus gave us Indy 500, a racing game that tries to be a full simulation of the real Indianapolis 500 race, with 33 cars and the proper IndyCar feel. While racing, it offers a first-person perspective, and a replay mode in a similar TV broadcast fashion is also there. We also get the chance to realistically set up the car, and the changes made directly affect how it handles. Modifications include wing downforce, tire pressures, wheel stagger, making the right side wheels larger to compensate for the banked corners, and turbo output, which provides boost but stresses the engine and uses more fuel. The field is represented as realistic, and the qualifying order stays true to the 1989 Indianapolis 500 starting grid, with one exception. Our car, numbered 17, replaces car 29 of Rich Vogler, who qualified in 33rd and last place. After qualifying, players can race over 10, 30, 60 or the full 200 laps. Lower modes remove car damage and the full course yellow system, which can make for repeat carnage, including traffic collisions and huge pile-ups. So many of us would turn the car around and drive full speed against the other drivers. Yeah.
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the graphic adventure.
Did someone yell Indiana Jones? Again, if you usually watch my content, you know that I'm a huge indie fan. I've brought a handful of Indiana Jones related videos to the channel over the years, so I'll leave the direct link for that playlist on the top right of the screen and in the description below for you to check out if you're a sucker for indie related stuff like me. The graphic adventure uses the same scum gameplay system as seen in Maniac Mansion. Most of the screen is used for a visual rendition of the current scene. At the bottom of the screen are words, which can be clicked on using the mouse to activate their functions. For example, objects can be picked up, used, pushed or pulled, and turned on and off. It was a step forward in what graphic adventures were concerned, where the true meaning of the phrase point and click was indeed accurate. Sierra Games, for instance, were still tailing back and using a parser to type commands using the keyboard. Most locations are from the movie, but some further scenes are added, and keeping with Indiana's action man persona, the game also features pure action scenes. Unlike most Lucasfilm adventures, in this one you can indeed die. One neat touch was that within the game package, we can find the Dr. Jones Holy Grail Diary. It contains essential information for solving the Holy Grail puzzle at the end of the game. It really gave that feeling of being part of an Indiana Jones adventure. Two PC versions of this graphic adventure were released, one with 16-color EGA graphics and another with 256-colored VGA graphics, which was the one I played over and over, mainly because there were many different ways of completing the game. It's among my favorite point-and-click graphic adventures ever made, and you can witness that by watching my top 10. Link in the description below and on the top right of the screen. So guys, here you have it, the 10 games I spent the most time with and that were released back in 1989, the year when I started to mess around with MS-DOS personal computers. Tell me down in the comments section below if you've played any of them, and feel free to share your personal favorites from 1989. I would love to know. Let's continue to dive into my favorite DOS games year by year. So here's my 10 most played games from 1990 that indeed grabbed my attention and made me lost tons of hours devouring every moment that I spent playing them at school and also over at friends' houses. Let's take a look.
Puzznik.
I was hooked to arcade gaming back in the 80s and 90s, so Taito was a huge name for me and would make me spend lots of coins trying out all their novelties. One Taito arcade legend is a tiny puzzle game entitled Puzznik that was even considered the 34th best game of all time for the Commodore Amiga. It's no more nor less than a tile-matching turn-based or hot-seat two-player puzzle arcade game released in 1989 for arcades and a year later for a bunch of home systems, PCs included. And let me tell you, this game is highly addictive, so be careful. Ocean Software was the company behind the conversion to practically all home systems of that era, except for this DOS port. Besides the arcade original, I would play this game to death on my ZX Spectrum 128K plus 2A and later on my Amiga 500. Also, and between classes, I would also play it with my mates at school, at the computer class, and see who was the smarmiest and fastest around to try and solve these intricate puzzles. As said, this DOS port wasn't by Software Creations and Ocean Software. It was brought to us by Banana Development. Yeah, have you ever heard of them? Me neither. And Puznik was one of their latest efforts in this area, to my knowledge. These guys were specialized in IBM PCs and Apple II to ENGS conversions of coin-operated games from some of the biggest arcade names in the US. They would mess around with porting games like Contra and Operation Wolf to MS-DOS based computers. What I can't explain is that conversions from Banana Development were supposed to only be available in the United States. I guess that someone brought one of their games over to Europe and it simply spread it like bunnies. Or downloaded a copy through a bulletin board system. BBS's anyone? A really fun and addictive little game from those amazing folks at Taito, and a pretty faithful conversion.
Prince of Persia.
It's tough. Very tough. An incredibly demanding game. Pixel perfect jumping was key to master this game. But it was so groundbreaking when it came out that left everyone who played it speechless, me included. It was created by the visionary Jordan Mechner during the span of almost 4 years, and the first version to come out was for the Apple II. The game was regarded as a forerunner of the cinematic platformer genre, so rather than following the more common jump and run mechanics, it focuses on careful advancement through fairly complex levels, emphasizing the protagonist's vulnerability and survival aspect. A technique called rotoscoping was used to give more realism to the animation of the character's movements, and as you know already, Jordan's brother was the, let's say, actor to perform these animations in real life, a technique also used in Jordan's first game, Karateka. What you probably didn't know was that their father composed the original music for Prince of Persia. In this one, we must avoid deadly traps, solve some simple jumping and environmental puzzles, and engage in sword fights with the guards. We have an infinite number of lives, but have to restart at the beginning of a level each time we die, and must complete the game within an hour. It sounds simple, but it isn't. Even so, a truly groundbreaking game, unlike everything else back in the day, that originated a plethora of ports and spawned a series that is still strong today.
Sid Meier's Railroad Tycoon.
Sid Meier is a legend in gaming, with some of the best well-known games under his belt. He's been around since 1981, developing and producing games, and his most successful series is, with no doubt, Civilization. The objective in Railroad Tycoon is to build and manage a railroad company by laying tracks, building stations, and buying and scheduling trains. The player acts as a railway business person and may start companies in any of 4 geographic locations: the Western United States, Northeast United States, Great Britain or Continental Europe, and the starting date varies depending on the map chosen. The company starts with $1 million in capital, half equity, half a loan. The company may raise additional capital through the sale of bonds. We manage the entire business and can also handle individual train movement and build additional industries. The game models supply and demand of goods and passengers, as well as a miniature stock market on which we can buy and sell stock of our own or competing companies. The game also has other railroad companies attempting to put us out of business with stock dealings and rate wars. A truly engaging and rewarding experience that brought that extra level of realism without losing all the fun of ludic entertainment.
Rick Dangerous 2.
The first Rick Dangerous was a huge deal for me on my ZX Spectrum and on my Amiga, so a sequel was highly anticipated. In this one, we must stop the fat guy and his evil plans to help an alien race take control of the entire world. Our journey takes place in Hyde Park, the ice caverns, a forest and the atomic mines, and we must solve positional puzzles and memorize the locations of laser bolts and booby traps, just like in the first game with those nasty spikes that would come out of nowhere. Besides that, we must obviously avoid enemies like robots, penguins and nomads. Also, a 5th level will be unlocked after the completion of the 4 standard levels. Rick can climb ladders and crawl through tight spaces. He's equipped with a laser gun and 6 bombs, but can also punch with some effect. The controls are very easy to understand. Pressing fire and up shoots the gun, pressing fire and down places the bomb, pressing fire and bottom left or bottom right makes Rick slide a bomb along the floor in the specific direction. The end of Rick Dangerous 2 does not complete the story. The game finishes with a cliffhanger, with Rick escaping via a teleporter device, with the caption, "What will Rick do next?" Though this might have hinted another sequel to the story, Rick Dangerous 3 was never made. Although a Rick Dangerous 2.5 was given away by the One Amiga on a cover disc, this was only a few additional levels and more of a demo than an actual sequel. Many of the concepts featured in these levels were later used in a Super Nintendo game entitled Danger Dan, which was also unfinished. It would have been amazing to see a continuation to this saga, wouldn't it?
King's Quest V. Absence makes your heart go yonder.
King's Quest V was first in many topics. Was the first adventure game to be released on CD-ROM in a multimedia PC format. Was the first to have digitized voiceovers. Was the first to use digitized hand-painted backgrounds. Was the first classic Sierra adventure to switch to icon control from the text parser system, and was the first title to cost over $1 million to produce. Despite not being my favorite in the whole series, my personal favorite is its sequel, King's Quest VI. This 5th game had such an immersive story that snatched me immediately, and being the first Sierra game to truly embrace the point-and-click interface, slightly different from the one we so much love in LucasArts adventures, was another argument to fully explore it and get the most from. So in this one, moving the mouse to the top of the screen reveals a hidden menu with each of the different actions and as well the different game options and the inventory bag. Everything you should expect from an adventure game is present, even a king, yeah, that's right. The series is called King's Quest, but you can only play with a king in this one and in the second installment, King's Quest II Romancing the Throne. And the version of this 5th entry that everyone should experience must be this one you're seeing now, released 2 years later in 1992, the enhanced CD-ROM VGA version with full voiceovers. It still manages to grab me after all these years. Amazing.
Come on, Cedric, get in the boat. Aye, aye, Captain.
Wing Commander.
Wing Commander is a space combat simulator combined with shipboard dialogues that was developed by Origin Systems and published first back in September of 1990 for IBM PCs. Other versions would come 2 years later for the Amiga, the Super Nintendo and the FM Towns. The Sega CD would also receive its own conversion that would only arrive during 1994, a bit late from where I'm standing. The game was considered a major step forward for space dogfight games, featuring graphics, audio and a story campaign that invited the inevitable comparison to the Star Wars films. We play as a second lieutenant, just out of the academy, with some good work under our belt. We're posted to Tiger's Claw, the flagship of the Confederation fleet, and on board the ship, we can save or load the game, visit the bar to get the latest gossip, or go straight to mission briefing and the 3D space combat part. The 3D space combat has you sitting in the cockpit, where we control the craft like roll, turn, up or down, afterburner, as well as fire guns and launch missiles. There are 4 different crafts on the comfort side, each with different flight characteristics and armament. We'll have a wingman on each mission, and we should keep him alive, as he will help us if we issue the right orders. We can also taunt the enemy. We'll be fighting several different types of adversary fighters and capital ships, and even combat a few Kilrathi aces. When the mission is complete, land back on board the ship and get ready for the next one. It was incredibly well received and paved the road for LucasArts to bring, a few years later, their own saga of Star Wars related space combat simulators from the X-Wing and TIE Fighter series, but with a different approach in what graphics were concerned. But I'll leave that for a future video. Even so, and while you're at it, check my retrospective on the Lucasfilm and LucasArts history of Star Wars games.
Ivan, Iron Man Stewart Super Off-Road.
I'm sure that you all played this one back in the day, through the many home conversions by GrafsGold and Software Creations available during 1990 and 1991 for practically all computers and consoles. I first recall playing it at the computer lab at school on a 386 desktop PC, and sadly never came across that iconic arcade cabinet with those 3 steering wheels. So, and besides this MS-DOS version, I was all over the ZX Spectrum and the Amiga ports of Super Off-Road. Also played the Mega Drive version over at a friend's house, and only many years later tried out the Super Nintendo version through emulation. To this day, I'm yet to try all other versions, cause as said, it was all over the place, for the Master System, for the NES, for the Game Boy, for the Atari ST, for the Commodore 64, for the Amstrad CPC, for the Game Gear, for the Atari Lynx, you name it. And please tell me, which ones have you played and are most fond about? And if you want to know more about the whole series, yes, it was the first game on a pretty cool series, check my retrospective and history video on the subject, link above and in the description below. It was converted from the arcade original from 1989 by Leland Corporation, an extremely fun and addictive off-road game to play up to 3 players simultaneously, plus 1 more controlled by the computer. There are several off-road tracks with jumps, bumps, holes, water splashing, you name it. And those figure 8 tracks are a joy to blast through, and they just look like Destruction Derby death matches, trying to avoid the other opponents. Ivan Iron Man Stewart Super Off-Road is so much fun, and probably where my love for off-road racing started. And this one was included back in 2012 in the Midway Arcade Origins compilation for the PS3 and Xbox 360.
Golden Axe.
I guess that everyone on Earth played Golden Axe. It's one of the most fondly remembered video games ever, and also one of my first experiences on a DOS machine equipped with VGA graphics back in 1990 at school. With this amazing artwork and backstory that somewhat reminds me of the fantasy medieval scenario of Conan the Barbarian, from where the game was in fact inspired, we must guide our heroes across the besieged land of Uria, slaughter the main villain Death Adder, free the king and his daughter, and gain possession of the Golden Axe. Sounds simple, but Death Adder's foes are tough and have some of their own moves up their sleeves. Except these skeletons. And this Uria spot must be a very hot place, cause both Tyrese Flare the Amazon chick and Axe Battler the Barbarian spend the entire game walking around in their underwear. Okay, jokes aside, I can't simply recall another video game available till that time in where we could cast magic spells, ride dragons and fight skeletons, all this on the backs of a giant turtle and of an eagle. Brilliant stuff! The PC version would also allow us to use dragons on the back of the main characters, play with the final boss, Death Adder, and so on, simply by changing file names in the game's folder. So use your imagination. Another fun fact is that most of the death screams of the bad guys were digitized from the film First Blood, the first Rambo movie. And also from Conan the Barbarian. Yeah.
4D sports driving.
4D sports driving was known in the US as stunts, and let me say that it makes more sense having the name used in Europe, because it's part of the 4D sports series along with 4D sports tennis and 4D sports boxing that I also played, but not as much. The game places emphasis on racing on stunt tracks and features a track editor in where I would spend infinite hours creating the most absurd and unique tracks to share with my friends and school colleagues. Yes, cause friends and colleagues are a totally different thing.
Oh yeah.
The game was evidently influenced by hard driving and has many similar elements to the game Stunt Driver, which was released the same year. We race a lap around the circuit with the aim of completing it as quickly as possible without crashing. These laps often feature special track areas such as loops, jumps, slalom roads and corkscrews. Like many others from that era and beyond, the play area is restricted and surrounded by a fence to prevent us from leaving. We can either race against the clock or choose between 6 different opponents, and sadly, there is no support for real-time multiplayer. The game features 11 different drivable cars, with either automatic or manual transmission, and replays of races can be saved and reviewed later. There are 4 camera views available during replay and actual driving, and the dashboard is an optional overlay on all views. It is also possible to continue the race from any point in the replay, but the time for that race will not be recorded. The game was originally developed for MS-DOS based PCs and 2 years later also released for the Amiga, FM Towns and NEC PC 9801. It arrived in Europe in December of 1990, so Christmas vacations were a truly memorable time where I would spend tons of hours over at friends' houses playing and creating all sorts of crazy tracks and performing the most absurd stunts. As said, the Amiga version would only arrive by 1992, and only then I would play it on my 500. By the end of 1993, I was finally able to enjoy the game on my own PC and further develop and enhance my own self-made tracks, the ones I created 3 years prior on other PCs and stored on disk.
The Secret of Monkey Island.
The very first time I tried this game was around September of 1990 on my brand new Amiga 500 and with pirated floppies that were duplicated in a perfectly normal and legit electronics and computer store, utilizing that useful tool known as Xcopy. 3 months later, just before Christmas, I tried the DOS version on a friend's IBM PS2 model, and I was blown away. The fact that we could install the game on the computer's hard drive and avoid that dreadful disk swapping that I was used to was, for my younger self, mind-blowing. It's a bit silly to describe this game, cause I'm pretty sure that even if you haven't played The Secret of Monkey Island, you've already heard all about it. We play as Guybrush Threepwood, that was named after a deluxe paintbrush file placeholder. So Guybrush wants to become a pirate, and to fulfill that dream, he embarks in this huge adventure that starts in the Malay Island. Collecting unusual objects will turn Guybrush into a skilled pirate, and just then he can crew a ship and head sail to the mysterious Monkey Island. Sword fighting is a common thing among pirates, but in this game, We win these battles by insulting the opponent. I don't know how much grog Gilbert, Grossman and Schaefer drank while developing the secret of Monkey Island, but I can imagine that it was quite a lot. This game is one of the most hilarious titles ever made, and the only way we can die in it is by staying underwater for more than 10 minutes. The designers just wanted to offer a completely different experience than the ones from Sierra's adventure games of the time, where if we did anything wrong, we just ended up dead. The relaxed nature of point-and-click adventure games was a breath of fresh air for players that were tired of violent and fast-paced action games. Not having to worry about extra lives or credits was something quite uncommon, and facing challenging puzzles was always seen as kind of didactical, even if most of them were solved with a crazy and stupid combination of items. So guys, here you have it, the 10 games released back in 1990 for PCs that I spent the most time with. Let's continue to dive into my favorite DOS games year by year, and this is getting tougher and tougher to choose and decide. So, are you ready to discover my 10 most played DOS games from 1991 that indeed grabbed my attention? Let's take a look. Bear in mind that for this one I had to leave out of the top 10 games like Gods, Leisure Suit Larry 5, Space Quest 4, Secret Weapons of the Luftwaffe, the very first Duke Nukem, The Blues Brothers, Superplex, Megalomania and Prehistoric. All these were that close to be promoted to this year's top 10, so consider them as honorable mentions. I've played most of them on my Amiga 500 and not on PC back in the day, so that's the main reason for them not being featured in the top 10. So, with that said, let's dig in!
Joe and Mac Caveman Ninja.
If you usually watch my content, you know that I'm a huge fan of arcade gaming. I spent countless hours hanging around at the many arcades I had in my area back in the day, so I was always looking forward to grab the many conversions of my favorite arcade games over to the ZX Spectrum, Amiga, Mega Drive and PC. Joe and Mac was one of those examples that I love so much and spent tons of coins at one of those local arcades, and that I simply had to have the PC port made by Elite Systems. It features the characters Joe and Mac as caveman ninjas in a multi-level platform area, where we have to jump and club incoming enemies. We can also throw at them from distance using such weapons as boomerangs, bones, fire, flints, electricity and stone wheels. The objective of the game is to rescue a group of voluptuous cave girls who were kidnapped by a rival tribe. To do that, we have to fight our way through these prehistoric places packed with dinosaurs, carnivorous plants and those annoying rival cavemen. Our journey is filled with comical situations, making this title so entertaining and highly addictive, in such a pleasing and amazing setting, packed with some of the most gorgeous graphics that I saw until then.
Speedball 2 Rural Deluxe.
I didn't place Gods in this top 10, but Speedball 2 had to be here. A masterpiece by the Bitmap brothers that I already brought to the channel within the complete history of the bitmaps that I invite you all to check out. The link will be in the description below and on the top right of the screen. Speedball 2 Rural Deluxe offers a violent, futuristic gameplay that is also fast and frantic, with heavy tackling encouraged to retrieve the ball, but you already knew that if you've played the previous one. There are 5 game modes: Knockout, Cup, League, Practice and Multiplayer. Each game lasts for 180 seconds, divided into 2 halves. Power-ups and tokens appear on the pitch, including ones to make our players extra tough or freeze the opponents. Speedball 2 makes several changes over the original Speedball. Each team has 9 players on court rather than 5, and targets on the floor and walls can be hit for bonus points. The number of points that a team receives for scoring a goal is normally 10, that can be increased to 15 or 20 via the use of score multipliers located on the walls of the pitch. But the opposition can sometimes immediately grab the ball and nullify this. The same number of points for scoring a goal is given for injuring a player from the opposing team. When a player is injured, he is replaced by one of 3 substitutes. If all 3 substitutes are injured, the injured player will be forced to return to the game and play on in spite of his injuries. There are also 5 stars which are worth 2 points each if we hit them, more if we have the multiplier activated, but this can also be cancelled out by the opposition hitting the same star. Next to the stars there are portals, which throw the ball out to the opposite side of the pitch in the direction it was going. Speedball 2 was first released for the Atari ST and the Amiga a year prior and was a huge hit on both systems, but this PC port was even considered by PC Gamer magazine the 24th best computer game of all time, claiming that you just can't beat this game for pure action.
Police Quest 3: The Kindred.
The Kindred is the 3rd installment of the Police Quest series, and its events take place after those described in Police Quest 2: The Vengeance. The game brings back some of the elements of the first game, such as a modified version of driving sequences and police procedures unrelated to the main plot. Computer work is particularly emphasized, requiring the player to perform tasks such as using facial composite software or figuring out murder patterns by studying a map. Like other Sierra adventures of the time, the game uses an icon-based interface for interaction with the environment. Sonny Bonds, the sergeant of Lighton Police Department, thought he could finally enjoy a peaceful life with his wife Marie after the drug lord Jesse Baines has been put away for good. However, a series of gruesome murders perpetrated by a sinister cult known as the Kindred shocks the city. Marie becomes a victim of their attack and falls into a coma. It becomes Sonny's very personal mission to track down the attackers and make them pay for their crimes. This 3rd title in the series is still very enjoyable and probably the best within this, let's say, style of crime solving, brain melting, puzzle matching, CSI impersonation of a game. If you watch my documentary on Sierra Online, Jim Walls was convinced by Ken Williams to come aboard and write intriguing plots for the Police Quest series. Sadly, during the late development stages of this 3rd installment, Jim ended up leaving Sierra due to, and I quote, circumstances. Sierra employee Jane Jensen finalized the writing for the still unfinished Police Quest 3, and former LAPD chief Daryl Gates was named to take over the Police Quest series. Jim Walls, along with several former Sierra employees, would go on to design Blue Force. Meanwhile, check my documentary on Sierra Online if you missed it. Link above and in the description below.
The Simpsons arcade game.
And here comes another of my all-time favorite beat-em-up games to play at the arcades, The Simpsons the arcade game. It was developed and published by Konami and was the first video game based on the Simpsons franchise. 3 more would come soon after and in that same year. It was another one of those incredible arcade cabinets that would allow up to 4 players simultaneously, controlling the members of the Simpsons family as they fight various enemies to rescue the kidnapped Maggie. Homer punches and kicks, Marge swings her vacuum cleaner, Bart wields his skateboard, and Lisa uses a jump rope as a whip, but other weapons such as hammers and bowling balls are also available to use. The game's levels are Downtown Springfield, Krusty Land, Springfield Discount Cemetery, Moe's Tavern, Springfield Gorge, Dreamland, the Channel 6 Studio, and the Power Plant. Each level ends with a boss whose speed and strength will increase after taking a certain amount of damage. End-level bosses are the wrestler Professor Werner von Braun, a hot air balloon shaped like Krusty the Clown, a pair of bouncers, a drunk at Moe's Tavern, a henchman in a bear suit, an imaginary gigantic bowling ball, and a martial arts sensei dressed like a kabuki actor. There's also the showdown finale against Smithers and Mr. Burns in a robotic outfit. It was a commercial success and one of the top 3 best-selling arcade video game machines of 1991. It even features the television show's voice actors reprising their respective roles as the Simpsons family. So this is nothing more than a Simpsons interactive episode. Isn't this awesome? I absolutely love it, because I'm a huge fan of the animated series and, as said, of arcade beat-em-up games. Feel free to check my top 16 favorites, link in the usual places. Curiously, it was only ported to the Commodore 64 and MS-DOS soon after its launch in the arcades.
Wing Commander 2 Vengeance of the Kilrathi.
The basic gameplay of Wing Commander 2 is very similar to its older brother that I brought in the previous episode. However, there are all new ships for both the Kilrathi and the Confederation. Only the Rapier returns from the previous game in an upgraded version. The Wing Commander series trademark cinematic storytelling is greatly expanded in this second entry in the series, with many animated cutscenes continuing the story between missions. Our carrier, the Tiger's Claw, is destroyed by Kilrathi stealth fighters, and we are blamed for the loss of the ship. After being demoted, we are transferred to a space station far off the front lines, where we are supposed to spend the rest of our career. What a sad ending for such a good fighter pilot, right? But 10 years later, we're able to save the Confederation flagship, the Concordia, from a Kilrathi attack. On the ship we meet many old friends, so back in the cockpit it's up to us to stop the Kilrathi and prove our innocence in the destruction of the Tiger's Claw. But that's not as easy as it sounds. Since capital ships now employ phase shielding, making them immune to normal weapons fire, only special torpedoes can damage them. Only heavy fighters and bombers are able to make torpedo runs. Before a torpedo can be fired, the shields of the target must be analyzed to find a way to get through, which results in a long locking phase during which the bomber must not move. The bombers are equipped with one or more gun turrets to protect them from enemy fighters during the lock-on. Another new technology are chaff pods, which can be deployed to lure enemy missiles off the target. Such an amazing game with a highly engaging and addictive plot that has the power to draw us in and immerse ourselves for hours in a row.
We've destroyed a capital ship!
Oh no, more lemmings.
The original Lemmings is simply my favorite game on the Commodore Amiga. Again, check my history video on it to know everything and more. Link is, well, you know where it is. So when another Lemmings game was announced, I simply had to play it. And to exhaustion. It was released in both the standalone and an add-on version and features 100 new levels and all new graphics and music. Later, a Windows 95 version of this game was released in, well, 1995 that included practically all of the levels from Lemmings and oh no, more Lemmings. As you can witness, the gameplay is identical to the original Lemmings. However, while the first few levels for the fun rating in the original game are tutorial-like, the tame levels in this one are just simple levels without hints on how to complete them. All following levels are way more difficult than those from the original game and become tougher at a much greater pace. Even so, these new levels are way more entertaining as they present a much greater challenge than those from the first game in the series. And if you bought the German magazine CD player back in the day, the full version of the game was given away for free by mistake in their February issue of 1994. The editorial team received 2 unlabeled discs from Psygnosis, one with the full version and another one with the demo version for the cover mount CD. And they mixed them up. Yeah.
Heart of China.
Heart of China is an adventure game with a romantic theme somewhat reminiscent of films such as Raiders of the Lost Ark, and being a huge fan of Indiana Jones, I simply had to play it. The game is set during the 1930s China, as well as a few other locations. It uses a simple point-and-click system for interaction and object manipulation, and is very similar visually and gameplay-wise to Rise of the Dragon, released a year prior. Some of the tasks in the game have multiple solutions, allowing us to pursue different methods and choose different responses in branching dialogues. However, some choices may lead to the death of the main protagonist or bring the investigation to a dead end. There are also a few arcade sequences which can be skipped if we fail to complete them after several tries. The game utilizes digitized photos of live actors superimposed on beautiful hand-painted graphics. Curiously, a 16-color EGA version was also produced but rarely distributed, probably because it wouldn't shine through with all the magic and beauty of those hand-painted graphics. As for its plot, we simply have to rescue Kate, the daughter of a wealthy businessman named Lomax. She was abducted by a Chinese warlord named Li Deng near Chengdu, where she was volunteering as a nurse. Lomax recruits a former World War I fighter pilot, Jake Lucky Masters, that's us, for a dangerous mission. Travel to Hong Kong, locate a mysterious ninja, and find a way to infiltrate Li Deng's fortress and rescue Kate. As simple as that. Heart of China was truly ahead of its time in some respects, like for instance, it assembled a cast of nearly 100 actors. Now, that's truly impressive for a video game released back in 1991.
Sid Meier's Civilization.
Sid Meier continues to bring amazing experiences to gamers, and his latest achievement was with Civilization. It has the widest scope of any strategy game of its time. We are a leader of a nation. We begin in a Stone Age, and our eventual goal is to become the dominant civilization in the world, either by wiping out everybody else or being the first to get a spaceship to Alpha Centauri. As the nation's leader, we have many responsibilities, like building cities and then micromanage them, constructing various buildings. Most people in our cities will be working on the neighboring lands to get food, cause without it, our community won't survive or even grow. Some will work on production to build military units and buildings, and trading, which can be exchanged for money, science or luxuries that make people happy. We decide how much trade we want to invest into each of these areas, and we have to make sure that our people are in a good mood. If they get too unhappy, the city will collapse into disorder and won't produce anything until we fix the situation. We can even build wonders of the world, such as the pyramids or the Hoover Dam. Each wonder is a unique thing, and only one of each can exist in the world. They give us a lot of benefits if we complete them, but they take a long time to build, and many of them will eventually stop doing its thing. There are obviously other nations in the world, but also the threatening barbarians, so we'll have to invest into the military to protect our people and attack the enemy. Peace treaties can be signed with other nations and even exchange scientific knowledge with them, but eventually we'll probably have to fight. We control each of our military units on a world map, attacking the opponent's units and cities. And I could be here all day talking about Civilization. It's such a huge game, so it's better for me to go on to the next one. I almost forgot. Due to a bug in the game, the pacifist leader Mahatma Gandhi could become extremely aggressive and make heavy use of nuclear weapons. Yeah, never saw that happening, but this fact remains as an urban legend in gaming.
Another World.
I believe that Eric Chahi learned something with Jordan Mechner and his Prince of Persia game. When Eric needed a model for the rotoscoping sequences, he got his brother to run around in the back garden of their house. Yeah. Another World was a true technical achievement back in the day. It was the first to have cinematic cutscenes, seen in many games since. Even Fumito Ueda from Ico fame claimed that Another World was an influence to him and to that iconic game. All graphics are filled vector images, something that was used before to save disk space with early adventure games like King's Quest, but never before in an action game. Also, all music and sound effects are mixed in real time to provide multi-channel music and sound on modest sound hardware, even on a 286. The Amiga and Atari ST versions came out first, and many players complained that Another World was too easy. So Eric asked Daniel Moraes to include in this PC version 2 extra levels and slightly increase the difficulty in some other parts of the game. Oh yeah, and you're probably asking, who the hell is Daniel Moraes? Daniel Moraes was the guy that ported Another World to DOS and was later one of the lead designers of Eric's Heart of Darkness. A young physics professor named Lester conducts a particle experiment. Suddenly something goes wrong, lightning strikes, and in a moment Lester finds himself in a strange alien world. Now he must fight for his life, first with his bare hands, then with a gun he finds. But what gives him courage is that he is not alone. One of the aliens, who also escapes from the prison, helps him on his dangerous quest. Friendship can overcome all obstacles. Another World combines shooting, platforming, and puzzle-solving elements. The game is divided into stages. Some of them are straightforward and can only be accessed one time, while others are connected to each other, creating a larger environment. Exploration and problem solving are emphasized, and many levels include challenges not seen in the previous ones. Tasks may involve environmental puzzles, timed sequences, precise jumping, and combat. Out of This World was its North American title, simply to avoid confusion with the popular but unrelated TV series Another World, airing since 1964 on that country, and Flashback is often regarded as its sequel. The true sequel came in 1992, Heart of the Alien, exclusively for the Sega CD. As for Flashback, designed by Eric's colleague Paul Cousset, it simply drank inspiration from Another World, just like Ico, Silent Hill, and even Metal Gear Solid.
Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge.
This was inevitable. Monkey Island 2 had to be in first. After the huge success of the first one that came a year prior, LeChuck's Revenge arrived and simply blew everyone away. I even have a freaking poster on my wall. I tried to play it on my Amiga 500, but the dreadful disc swapping routine was truly annoying. The game was even known among the Amiga community as the disc juggling simulator, cause it came with 11 diskettes that had to be swapped around whilst playing the game. Insult sword fighting was truly missed in this one, but even so, it's one of the best-selling adventure games of all time. It uses the same command-based SCUM interface and branching dialogue system that were used in its predecessor. The game features hand-painted graphics and was the first to utilize LucasArts' iMuse system, which synchronizes music with visual action on the screen by providing smooth transition between themes. The events of the game take place on a new set of islands, and uncommonly for adventure games, LeChuck's Revenge features 2 difficulty levels. The easier one is dubbed Monkey Island 2 Lite. It bypasses or simplifies some of the harder puzzles and was destined to magazine reviewers, as stated in the back of the box. Guybrush Threepwood, the mighty pirate who can hold his breath for 10 minutes, could have lived quietly and happily with his sweetheart Elaine, the governor of Melee Island. But the restless pirate spirit won't let Guybrush in peace. Things didn't go very well with Elaine, and Guybrush embarks on a new adventure, searching for the legendary treasure of Big Whoop. However, the evil ghost pirate LeChuck hasn't left the stage yet. His minions are trying to bring him back from the dead one more time. That's the premise of the game, and if you haven't played it until today, please do it! Just don't suspend Guybrush above a certain pool of acid for a certain number of minutes. you will be lowered into it and die, despite what everyone says about LucasArts adventure games. So guys, here you have it, the 10 games released back in 1991 that I spent the most time with. Let's continue to dive into my favorite DOS games year by year, and let me tell you, 1992 was a terrific year in PC gaming, and it's all just getting started. So, are you ready to discover my 10 most played DOS games from 1992 that indeed grabbed my attention? Let's take a look. Bear in mind that for this one, I had to leave out of the top 10 games like Dune, The Humans, Curse of Enchantia, Goblins 2, A-Train, Lure of the Temptress, Quest for Glory 3 Wages of War, Star Trek 25th Anniversary, and Ultima 7 The Black Gate. All these were that close to be promoted to this year's top 10, so consider them as honorable mentions. With that said, let's begin!
Comanche Maximum Overkill.
Comanche Maximum Overkill is the first helicopter simulator to showcase Novologic's voxel engine, which renders organic and lifelike terrain and realistic-looking objects that no other game using polygons could match, and, along with all that, features the Army's experimental RAH-66 Comanche light attack helicopter. The addition of voxel space was indeed groundbreaking. It was the first time DOS gamers were given fully illustrated environments within which to fly. Shadows and reflections moved in realistic relative sync with the pilot and in relation to a natural light source. There are over 20 scripted campaign missions and features a simple flight model and allows the player's helicopter to take much more damage than it could in reality. Additionally, weapons on the Comanche feature deadly accuracy and power. It was originally developed and published by Novologic for DOS-based computers, with 2 expansion packs coming later down the road, Mission Disc 1 and Over the Edge. Also, a compilation titled Comanche CD was released in 1994 that included the main game and those 2 expansion packs. By 1995, that compilation was released for Mac OS, simply known as Comanche Mac. A port of the game was in development for the Super Nintendo using Super FX and was even displayed at 1995's E3, but was eventually cancelled. A Nintendo spokesperson said that the project was aborted because of unresolvable difficulties within the game's graphics and speed.
Ultima Underworld, The Stygian Abyss.
Ultima Underworld, The Stygian Abyss is commonly considered the first role-playing game with fluid first-person movement in a real 3D environment. Unlike earlier first-person RPGs such as Dungeon Master or Eye of the Beholder, the player can move in every direction and the graphics are updated continually. The player is also able to look up and down with the press of a key, jump and swim. The dungeon is not made entirely of corridors and rooms arranged in a rectangular fashion, but has a lot of variety: slopes, stairs, bridges, underground rivers and more. It was a technological masterpiece that pioneered many of the first-person elements that would soon show up in Wolfenstein 3D and Doom. Underworld: The Stygian Abyss was not a first-person shooter, but rather a deep and immersive role-playing game set in the long-established Ultima universe, and the excellent music and sound effects further added to the feeling of being in the game. It was undoubtedly the most atmospheric RPG of its day, and my most played and beloved game in a genre that I would abandon a few years later. The game's combat system is action-oriented. The player has to draw his weapon, aim at his opponent, and hold the cursor over the game screen to inflict damage. The longer the player holds it, the stronger is the attack. Some weapons have different types of attacks, depending on where the cursor is held. For example, jabs are executed when the cursor is near the bottom of the screen, while slashes are performed with the cursor in the middle. The game's background story is standard stuff about rescuing a damsel from the depths of the dungeon, but once inside the Stygian abyss, all manner of subquests and conversations with the non-player characters contrive to add deeper layers to the initial plot. Control of the game is quite simple, and although fighting plays its part, you'll also need to use your head to bypass the various tribes of the abyss, like learning the phrases of the lizard's language, for example. Underworld is a large game with many hours of play, and if you can look beyond the rather pixelated graphics, it still provides a great gaming experience today. It was even given away for free in issue 74 of PC Gamer magazine back in July of 2000, along with 11 other masterpieces. Strangely enough, by 1997, a Japan-only PlayStation version surfaced with improved monster graphics and redone title music.
Dino Blaster.
It was first released for the PC Engine in December of 1990 under its original title, Bomberman, soon followed by the release of its North American TurboGrafx 16 counterpart in early 1991. European computer enthusiasts would also start enjoying it still in 1991 with the release of the Amiga version and under its European name, Dino Blaster. MS-DOS-based computer users would only start messing around with it by 1992, but this concept came a truly long way, written as a tech demo for Hudson Soft as far back as 1980. 3 years later was further developed and released for several Japanese computers from NEC, Fujitsu, Sharp and the MSX, and by 1984 that MSX version was brought to Europe under a different name, Eric and the Floaters, simply to avoid any association with a series of terrorist bombings carried out by the Irish Republic Army. It was also published for the ZX Spectrum by Sinclair Research in that same year, so with all that said, I can safely confirm that this new 1992 version is a remake of the original created over 10 years prior. But where Bomberman truly gained notoriety was on the Famicom, and by 1985 being ported back over to the MSX the following year as Bomberman Special. The Famicom version only left Japan by 1989, which was kind of strange, just a few months before this superior version landed over the PC Engine and TurboGrafx. Dino Blaster consists of 9 levels per stage, each tougher than the other, and each final one consisting of the boss that will have to be dealt with. The Bomberman character can move horizontally and vertically and lay down bombs behind him, thus destroying the enemies, but beware! Bomberman can block himself with his own bombs and thus become a victim of his own strategy, something that was demonstrated on an episode of the UK TV show Games Master, when the 5 members of the pop group Take That played it as part of a challenge. Yes, 5 players playing the game simultaneously, but in this particular case on an Amiga 600. And guess who won? Yeah, Robbie Williams. This was possible due to Hudson Soft's venture with NEC back in 1990 in the development of the TurboTap accessory for the PC Engine and TurboGrafx, later porting that multiplayer mayhem to other systems. The DOS version would only allow for 4 players to battle themselves simultaneously, which was more than enough from where I'm standing.
Crazy Cars 3.
Now for a racing game, a genre that you know that I'm completely crazy about. So, talking about crazy, here's Crazy Cars 3 from the French developer Titus. If you remove the U from the Titus, you get... okay, never mind. The Crazy Cars series was part of my gaming life since the glory days of the ZX Spectrum, where I played the first 2 games in the series. We just have to floor our way through in these illegal street races, overtaking all cars and trying to reach the main rivals in front of the pack, so that we can arrive in first place and win all the money in stake from the bets placed before the race started. It's that simple. We start out with just a basic Lamborghini and $6,000, and the aim is to rise to the top of the 4 divisions of racing through success on 60 racetracks across the United States. In each division there are 20 rival racers, up to 3 of which compete in each race at a time. The races also feature lots of local drivers, Sunday drivers going at normal speed, and police. Before each race we can be told of the quality of the locals and the likelihood of police presence. Crazy Cars 3 was upgraded and released a year later on a bunch of other systems, having also a name change, Lamborghini American Challenge. Titus managed to grab an official license from the manufacturer of the iconic Lamborghini Diablo and packed also a ton of improvements along with it, like changing the training mode in the original game into a much desired split-screen 2-player mode. So awesome!
Wolfenstein 3D.
A classic among classics, and you can confirm that simply by checking out the price of a sealed big box copy available on eBay. And this one is the CD version released a few years later. Holy crap! Wolfenstein 3D is an episodic first-person shooter and a follow-up to the top-down infiltration game Castle Wolfenstein, originally released back in 1981 for the Apple II. The game puts us in the boots of B.J. Blazkowicz, an Allied spy. There are 6 episodes, the first distributed completely free as shareware. That was my first contact with the game. The second and the third episodes were available after registration, and the 3 final missions, which happened before the events of the first episode, were available in the Nocturnal Missions pack. Each episode has 9 levels plus a secret level activated by a hidden switch somewhere in the 8 first levels. Regular levels often feature a maze-like appearance or large areas with many enemies where we must reach the exit elevator. To do so, we must kill the enemies and, depending on the level, activate push walls and or get silver and golden keys to open certain doors. Many objects can be found in a level, from medikits, chicken meals, dog food and even puddles of blood to restore health, to ammo and treasures. These solely exist for points. There are 4 weapons, all of them using the same bullets, except the knife, obviously. The knife and the pistol are given at the start of the level, while the machine gun is either found mostly in secret areas or picked up from SS troopers, and we must use them to slay all 5 kinds of enemies present in the game, 6 if we include the bosses. We start the game with 3 lives. Once we lose the last life, the game ends. To win extra lives, we have to either find a 1-up item in the level or get 20,000 points. Wolfenstein 3D takes place during World War II, but the enemy soldier getting knocked down by Blazkowicz on the box cover of the game is carrying an M16. That weapon didn't exist until 1960. Yeah, here's one more proof that Nazis did some time traveling back then and got some help from a more evolved species from the future.
King's Quest 6. Here today, gone tomorrow.
I will always recall this 6th entry in the King's Quest series with huge nostalgia, cause back then, me and 5 more friends saved money for months to buy the original boxed DOS version. So in late 1992, and after playing a pirated copy of the previous title that was mentioned on my video about my 10 most played DOS games from 1990, the 3D graphic intro movie, the professional voice acting and the multiple routes through the story overwhelmed us all. It just blew us away. Obviously that we needed to make copies of the original floppy disks so that each of us would play it and share experiences, helping each other's advancing through the story. Every day at school we would gather around and talk about each other's progression, and this was how we shared walkthroughs in early 90s, yeah. We would even draw sketches for the puzzles and take photocopies so that when we got home, could advance a bit more. It was the first point-and-click graphic adventure that I played on my brand new IBM PS1, with sound coming only from the PC speaker. Sound cards and a pair of speakers were so expensive back in those days, you know, a luxury. So my first playthrough of King's Quest VI was done entirely using the internal speaker of my IBM that gladly had this pretty handy volume knob so that I could play the game all night long without my parents noticing it. King's Quest VI brought huge improvements to the series, and to my eyes, could finally rival the latest Lucasfilm and LucasArts graphic adventures with its awe-inspiring visual beauty. An amazing experience that brings so many awesome memories. Like its predecessors in the series, King's Quest VI Here Today, Gone Tomorrow is a third-person puzzle-solving adventure game where we, as Prince Alexander, must travel between the land's 4 magical islands, each based on myth and fables, and encounter people and strange beasts that will either help or hinder him. And why must we do that, you may ask? Because of a girl we met in the previous game, Princess Cassima. It had to be. Later, a CD-ROM version of the game arrived that included both DOS and Windows versions, along with full speech, a pre-rendered introduction, and the Girl in the Tower theme song that could be heard for just 5 seconds on the floppy version. Obviously that this one would be among my favorite point-and-click adventure games ever. Feel free to check my top 10, link in the top right of the screen and in the description below.
Now you die!
Microprose Formula 1 Grand Prix.
Already out for the Amiga since November of 1991, Microprose Formula 1 Grand Prix dropped like a bomb on all MS-DOS based PC's hard drives. Even if you weren't into racing games or even into Formula 1, you most likely played this one back in the day. I was never that much of a fan of Formula 1, but I can recall 3 or 4 titles that I truly enjoyed playing throughout the years. Geoff Crammond is a legend when it comes to designing and programming sim racing video games. After Stunt Car Racer, we could only expect the best. And that was exactly what he delivered, the best Formula 1 game and racing game for that matter until that moment. So 1992 started with a bang with this incredible and accurate representation of the 1991 Formula 1 season, even if the game itself was not affiliated officially with the FIA or any Formula 1 drivers that obviously had fictional names within it. As said, the game is a simulation of Formula 1 racing from that period of time and was noted for its 3D graphics, remarkably high frame rate, around 25 frames per second, and attention to detail, in particular the player's ability to edit the teams and drivers and set up their car to their own personal specifications. So, and along with Indianapolis 500
From Papyrus
that I mentioned in my 1989's Top 10 video, Formula 1 Grand Prix was the second racing game to implement something that resembled real-world racing physics, accurate track modeling, and car handling that required a nails kit, somewhat similar to real-world driving skills to perform well, along with meaningful options to tune the behavior of the cars. Although not quite on the level of later simulations, the most important variables such as gear ratios, tire compounds, and wing settings were available to tune and, more importantly, proved to make an actual difference when driving. Important were also the functional rear-view mirrors and an instant replay system with a wide range of adjustable camera settings not seen in other games of that era. A truly groundbreaking game that resulted in a huge commercial success that spawned 3 sequels: Grand Prix 2, Grand Prix 3 and Grand Prix 4. Yeah. How can such a small and simple game be so addictive and on my top 3 most played DOS games from 1992? Beats me. What I know is that it grabbed me right in the first seconds of gameplay. Was developed by EgoSoft for the Commodore 64, Amiga and MS-DOS and is known to be a lunar lander and space taxi prehistoric clone, where we control a muscle-powered helicopter kind of elevator, and to make some money for our future wedding with our pretty lovely cave girl, we have to transport passengers from one place to another, yeah. Each level is made of a series of platforms with several cave entrances. Cavemen walk out of the caves and loudly announce where they want to go. We have to land our helicopter taxi next to the passenger and wait until he crawls inside, and then fly to the cave that he wants to get to. Controlling the vehicle is a bit complicated. We cannot directly fly up or down. Instead, we have to keep pedaling to fly up and cease pedaling when we want to go downwards. Bumping into a wall too hard will cause the game over and force us to restart. There is also a time limit for each level, and we'll get extra bonus points for getting passengers to their destination before time runs out. At the end of each level, we'll be given a code for keeping track of our progress. There are some dinosaur adversaries on certain levels, a pterodactyl which appears unexpectedly and flies across the screen, and a triceratops which becomes agitated when we land near and charges at our taxi. Not mentioning the T-Rex that is sleeping and blows our vehicle with its nostrils. As we pedal, we exert energy. To refill our energy so that we can keep pedaling, we can pick up a rock with blinking eyes and toss it at a tree also with blinking eyes, making a fruit to drop down. So let's eat it to replenish our energy. Also available is a very entertaining two-player cooperative mode, where we and our cave buddy will most likely fight for the passengers rather than help each other. So addictive!
Dune 2.
Dune 2 Battle for Arrakis, or the building of a dynasty in the US, was first released for DOS, followed a year later by an Amiga port, and by 1994 a Mega Drive Genesis release. It is often considered the first mainstream modern real-time strategy game and established many conventions of the genre. Even though set in Frank Herbert's famous Dune universe, the game is only loosely connected to the plot of any of the books or the films based on them. Controlling either the three houses, the player must fight a number of battles against the other houses. In the early levels, the goal is simply to earn a certain number of credits, while in the later missions, all enemies must be destroyed. The single resource of the game is the spice, which must be collected by harvesters. The spice is converted to credits in a refinery, which are then spent to construct additional buildings and units. There are two terrain types. Buildings can only be constructed on stone, while the spice is only found on the sand. However, units moving on sand attract the large sandworms of Dune, who are virtually indestructible and can swallow even large units whole. As levels progress, new and more advanced buildings and units are made available, including structures like a radar station, a repair facility, or defense turrets, and for units, various ground troops, light vehicles, and tanks. Each house can construct one unique special unit, and after building a palace improvement, can unleash a unique palace effect. After a mission is completed, we can select the next mission on a map of Dune. This choice determines the layout of the next map to be played, but has no effect on the overall campaign. A largely unknown but very curious feature in Dune 2 is that a small amount of credits is frequently subtracted from the player's budget, the amount directly proportional to the current power consumption in the player's base. Westwood Studios was really thinking ahead when creating this masterpiece of a game.
Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis.
You've already noticed that I'm the biggest Indiana Jones fan out there, and the Fate of Atlantis should be turned into a movie and remastered for current-gen systems. Damn, I even went on national TV stating that.
A Fate of Atlantis é daquelas histórias que deveria ser convertida em filme. É simplesmente soberba.
Screenwriter Hal Barwood, that would return later to also write the story for Infernal Machine, another one of my all-time favorites, wrote an amazing plot centered around the lost continent of Atlantis. I've forever been intrigued with Plato's amazing Atlantis dialogue, so The Last Crusade was begging for a sequel, and it eventually arrived first in 1992 and a year later with an enhanced CD-ROM version which included amazing voice acting and digitized sound effects. I still have my Geeks re-release of the game in all its glory. It offered an overwhelming and original story that can rival with the ones from all three first movies. The fourth one is quite forgettable, and the fifth could have been so much better. Just saying. So Nazis, a sort of mythological flavor, and a beautiful and somewhat annoying female character were the perfect ingredients for an Indiana Jones adventure. Sophia Hapgood would return later for Indy's first 3D action adventure, the aforementioned Infernal Machine, released in 1999, and that I have also reviewed in the past. Check my playlist of all Indiana Jones video games that I've covered throughout these 10 years of content creation here on YouTube. Link in the usual places. Needless to say that later I would also grab the GOG and Steam versions to play again and again and again. Damn! I completely lost the count of how many times I've played and finished The Fate of Atlantis. It still has the power to hold my attention hostage, like if there was no tomorrow. And let's not forget that this game has 3 different approaches to the story, with the in-game dialogue and storyline being cleverly adapted to each situation, which I found truly groundbreaking at the time. As the name suggests, we take control of the famous archaeologists in a frenetic race against the Nazis to be the first to unveil the secrets and whereabouts of the lost civilization of Atlantis. The action takes place in 1939, when Hitler's foes are searching for an ancient Atlantean power source that will potentially supercharge their tanks and bombs. So off we go on a globe-trotting adventure, which manages to capture all the action, humor and undertone of the movie franchise, with John Williams' intemporal soundtrack playing in the background.
I see the left horn.
A variety of compositions were arranged by the iMuse team, Michael Land, Clint Bajakian and Peter McConnell, and the fact of not being based on any of Indy's previous movies gave loose rein to Hal Barwood and his team to create this unique, inspiring and original story. And let's not forget that this game was included as an unlockable extra on the Wii version of Indiana Jones and the Staff of Kings, released back in 2009. All these years later, Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis refuses to die, and I'm crossing my fingers in relation to the upcoming indie game from Machine Games. I'm sure that I will love it, no matter what, cause as I said in the beginning, I'm a huge fan of the Man in the Hat, and everything that comes out that is even slightly and remotely related to indie, I simply have to check out. That's why the Tomb Raider and Uncharted series are so dear to me.
I'm Indiana Jones. Who are you, Buckethead?
Buckethead? What kind of insult is that?
I'll let Sophia explain it to you.
Indy!
Nice work.
So guys, here you have it, the 10 games released back in 1992 that I spent the most time with. Let's continue to dive into my favorite DOS games year by year, and let me tell you, 1993 was yet another incredible year in PC gaming. In fact, one of the best years in gaming, if not the best ever, to be honest. So, and with that in mind, here's my 10 most played DOS games from 1993 that I simply couldn't stop playing. Let's take a look. Bear in mind that for this one I had to leave out of the top 10 a ton of other amazing games, 20 more to be precise, that I'm now gonna showcase and that you must also check out. Simon the Sorcerer, Prince of Persia 2 The Shadow and the Flame, Prehistoric 2, The Lost Vikings, Lemmings 2 The Tribes, The Legend of Kyrandia The Hand of Fate, The Incredible Machine, Gabriel Knight Sins of the Fathers, Pinball Dreams, The Seventh Guest, Alone in the Dark 2, Betrayal at Krondor, Duke Nukem 2, IndyCar Racing, Mortal Kombat, Network Q RAC Rally, Police Quest 4 Open Season, Populous 2 Trials of the Olympian Gods, Quest for Glory 4 Shadows of Darkness, and Lotus 3 The Ultimate Challenge. All these were that close to be promoted to this year's top 10, so consider them as honorable mentions and a sort of top 30. With that said, let's begin.
Star Wars X-Wing.
Star Wars X-Wing was such a huge deal for me back in 1993. I would load the game up just to see that intro and listen to its music. This was the start of my addiction for Star Wars related games, and you can watch my documentary on Lucasfilm Games and LucasArts to get to know every single Star Wars game that ever existed, and all others coming from that incredible developer. This was the starting point for realistic space combat within the Star Wars universe, where we would have the chance to fly X-Wings, A-Wings and Y-Wings, a dream come true for many fans of the movie franchise like me. By November of '93 came also Rebel Assault, but because of it being a rail shooter, didn't grab me that much. It didn't even make it to the honorable mentions. The game casts us as a rookie rebel pilot, flying missions over the course of 3 tours of duty leading up to the battle against the Death Star. Missions range from solitary patrols to intense operatic battles with fleets of Star Destroyers. All those years developing combat flight simulators came indeed to fruition with Star Wars X-Wing, the team behind Battlehawks 1942, their finest hour, and Secret Weapons of the Luftwaffe, gained the amount of experience needed to finally bring this gem. That was one of the first titles that I played on my brand new IBM PS1 and ended up completely addicted to it. The feeling of being at the controls of one of those iconic spacecrafts, performing all sorts of missions and engaging TIE fighters was mind-boggling. Even now, X-Wing is so damn enjoyable to play. It was the first Star Wars title to be published by LucasArts, and one of the first simulation games to include 3D polygon graphics for spaceships, instead of less detailed bitmap graphics that were normally used in flight simulators. It went on being one of the best-selling PC games of 1993.
Sam and Max hit the road.
As you know, I'm a sucker for classic point-and-click adventure games, and Sam & Max Hit the Road was another one of those titles that grabbed me back in 1993, the year when I got this mighty 486 IBM PC. I simply had to try my new rig with all the brand new games that were being published, and at school we would copy tons of floppies at the computer class. Even the teacher wanted a slice of that pie. And with this particular one, we also needed to have the manual to be able to access the game entirely. So, over at the reprint room, we simply took photocopies from each other's already photocopied manuals, and that's it! As simple as that. Sam & Max Hit the Road was based on the original 1987 comic book series by Steve Purcell, and sees us investigating the mysterious disappearance of Bruno the Bigfoot and Trixie the Giraffe Neck Girl from a carnival freak show. That mission is assigned to a couple of freelance police officers, a naked and hyperactive bunny named Max, and a dog named Sam. 2 LucasArts trademarks were present in Sam & Max, the delicious humor, and as well their unique design rule to never let the player die. More or less. This way players didn't have to worry about constantly saving their game. We directly control Sam, though Max will usually follow closely behind and is even available to use directly as an item in the inventory. Sam is able to be directed anywhere on the screen, look at objects, try to use objects, try to speak to objects, and use items from his inventory on objects. Yeah. Sam & Max must unravel the mystery piece by piece in order to unlock new locations on their map. So our journey to find the missing freaks is a countrywide tour across the United States with locations linked together by highways that include such diverse stop-offs as the world's largest ball of twine, Mount Rushmore's Dinosaur Fun Park, and the surrealistic Mystery Vortex. The story hots up very nicely along the way, culminating in an unforgettable encounter with a whole convention full of Bigfoots, Yeti and the rest of their family. A sequel named Sam & Max Freelance Police was developed but cancelled back in March of 2004 because LucasArts thought it was, and I quote, not the appropriate time to release a graphic adventure game on the PC. Despite many petitions and negative feedback about the cancellation, the game was not put back into production. During the 80s and 90s, Lucasfilm and LucasArts was always my go-to company, so, and along with X-Wing, Sam & Max took a lot of my free time, and it was totally worth it. What a game!
They to be king of the creatures. I'm proud to be the lord of the old.
Flashback.
Flashback is known for being the best-selling French game of all time. It was a phenomenon when it debuted on the Commodore Amiga in December of 1992, prior to the release for IBM-compatible PCs, and it remains a fascinating experience even today. It incorporates elements of platforming, shooting and problem-solving, and can be described as a cinematic platformer, Prince of Persia style, following a design philosophy that was also demonstrated in Another World, also from Delphine Software. Compared to that one, Flashback focuses more on platforming and exploration of large levels. We play as Conrad, and to defend ourselves, we can shoot enemies with our gun and also use various objects to harm or distract them. Crouching and rolling are possible and essential moves that can be executed during combat. The gun has unlimited ammunition, however, shields are depleted when we're hit and can be recharged at special stations. Though most environments in the game are hostile, there are a few locations that are devoid of enemies, where it's usually required to talk to characters, gather information and complete tasks in an adventure-like fashion. All this technical and game design cleverness would be for naught if the game didn't have a decent story at the heart of it, and Flashback's tale of alien infiltration and forced amnesia is superb. It juggles action with atmosphere and delivers a game that is both intriguing and tense. Most of the versions utilize cutscenes with polygonal vector graphics, but the CD versions replace those with pre-rendered 3D animations. The Sega CD version even features voiceovers. This particular version was later adapted to PC CD-ROM, 3DO and CDI. Even though the Amiga version was the first one to arrive, it was a port from the original platform, which was the Mega Drive. Yeah. Sega's version only arrived a few months later, in the spring of 1993, soon followed by the PC, Acorn Archimedes and the Super Nintendo, this last one slightly censored. Another curious fact was that the zoom-in option, displayed whenever Conrad opens fire, is exclusive to the PC and Amiga. It was simply removed from all other versions.
Syndicate.
1993 was the year when my life as a gamer changed completely. Due to my academic choices, I had to embrace the PC with arms wide open and leave my Amiga 500 behind. So, and with the precious help from my parents, I bought this mighty IBM PS1 486 DX2 running at 66 MHz to give that extra boost in performance, mostly in games. Yeah, I told my parents that the machine was to help me with college, and it slightly was, but the Intel 486 DX2 was a true beast for gaming and the first processor to specifically delve into that amazing world that was rapidly emerging on home computing. And that was when I came across Syndicate, this futuristic cyberpunk real-time tactical game from Bullfrog, where we have to perform missions that range from rescuing captured allies, persuading scientists and civilians to join our cause, kill leaders of rival syndicates, etc. And while the game progresses, we must try and stay ahead of the latest breakthroughs in what weaponry and cyborg enhancements are concerned. The gameplay is visually reminiscent of XCOM, with an angled top-down perspective, but it is real-time rather than turn-based. We have missions ranging from infiltrate and capture to seek and destroy. In each of these, we direct a team of 4 agents as they move through the world shooting at anything that gets in their way. In pre-release versions of the game, the series apparently also featured mothers with baby carriages and dogs. These extra innocents were removed from the game before its release, and because of all of this, Syndicate ended up annoying a lot of people back then. It can be indeed completely disrespectful to the morality of our society. But that's just what attracted players in the first place. Peter Molyneux had some guts to produce and convince the publisher to release such an ultra-violent strategy game. The publisher's boss was Trip Hawkins. All good then. And it can indeed be extremely addictive. Once we've got through the first mission, we'll want to play another, and another, with that brilliant mixture of strategy, action and firepower. Yeah! In 1994 came an expansion disc, Syndicate American Revolt, that introduced the multiplayer capability of the game that was removed in this original from 1993, and by 1996, the proper and much anticipated sequel Syndicate Wars was released for PC and a year later for the PlayStation. Back to the original, the one that started all the mayhem. It was ported to a lot of systems, but the DOS version is, with no doubt, the one that everyone should play.
Epic Pinball.
2 years before becoming Digital Extremes, James Schmalz developed Epic Pinball in 9 months while still in college, using Deluxe Paint 2 for the graphics and Scream Tracker for the music. And the soundtrack is absolutely amazing. Just listen to it! James was inspired by the work of a Finnish PC demo group known as Future Crew, that by that time were creating some of the most impressive 3D demos for MS-DOS based PCs. A fun fact is that the members of this Finnish demo group, the so-called Future Crew, were approached by Tim Sweeney and Mark Rain from Epic Mega Games with a recruitment offer, which the group kindly refused. Let me remind you that Tim Sweeney is the CEO of Epic Games and the creator of the Unreal Engine, and Mark Rain is just vice president of Epic Games. So in short, Epic Pinball was born from the inspiration on an unfinished pinball game from the Finnish demo group Future Crew that declined Epic Mega Games' offer to finish it. It was published under the Epic Mega Games label and exclusive to DOS machines, and I believe that every PC gamer back in 1993 played this one, cause it was distributed as shareware with only the famous Android table available to play. And I've played the crap out of it! The complete game was composed of 3 different packs, with each pack containing 4 tables. So in total, we had the astonishing number of 12 completely different tables, being Enigma the weirdest one. But by 1993, only the first 2 packs were available. The game is played seen from a 2D top-down view, within a scrollable window, with plain raster graphics in 320 by 240. It was noted for being programmed entirely in assembly language for MS-DOS systems and originally distributed on floppy disks in those aforementioned 3 separate packs of 4 tables each. The original shareware version and this early retail version we're looking at included the original Android table. Later shareware versions and retail versions contained an updated table called Super Android, although it's still referred to as Android in the game's menu. Epic Pinball ended up being the publisher's top-selling shareware game ever, and James Schmalz earned more than $1 million from the shareware royalties in its first year alone.
Cannon Fodder.
Pronouncing this game's title to my friends was so damn funny back in school by the time it was released, cause removing one of the D's on the second word of Cannon Fodder is a bit on the naughty side when pronounced in Portuguese. Back in those days we were just innocent and curious kids, you know? So, Cannon Fodder was another game originally released for the Amiga and later ported to the PC and other systems. This one I only played on DOS back in the day, and only many years later I managed to try the Amiga original. That is the best, I must add. But even so, my first contact with this game was, as said, with the PC version, so this version is indeed the one that really means something to me and keeps the nostalgia levels sky high. In it, we must guide a team of up to 6 soldiers through 72 levels of combat in this top-down action strategy hybrid, best thought of as Lemmings crossed with Commando crossed with Dune 2. The characters are controlled indirectly using the mouse or a joypad if you happen to have one of those on your PC back in those days. We activate each soldier or group of soldiers by highlighting them, clicking one button on the mouse to move them to a particular spot and the other button for them to fire guns at the enemy. We can also pick up grenades or rockets that can be fired by pressing both mouse buttons at once, which can be handy on destroying a large group of soldiers, buildings or even some vehicles. Each mission has a specific objective and some feature vehicles such as tanks that are used to make things easier. Our troops can cross water but can't shoot within it, so finding and controlling bridges is often crucial. We can use the arrangement of trees to find hiding places to shoot from and should watch out for NPC soldiers doing the same. Cannon Fodder has a darkly humorous tone which was praised and condemned by many reviewers. Its creators intended it to convey an anti-war message, which some critics recognized but others ridiculed, like the Daily Star and a number of public figures. Even so, many reviewers highly praised the game, which widely achieved scores of over 90% in many magazines. It will forever be remembered for its singular sense of humor, beginning with a theme tune entitled "War Has Never Been So Much Fun," and ending each level by showing the graves of fallen comrades. Cannon Fodder is a sniggering satire on the glorification of war, with an underlying pacifist message.
SimCity 2000.
I absolutely love SimCity 2000. It was a huge leap forward in relation to its successor. This one is now played from an isometric perspective, as opposed to the original, which was played from a top-down perspective. The objective of the game is to create a city, develop residential and industrial areas, build infrastructure such as power and water facilities, and collect taxes for further development of the city. Importance is put on increasing the standard of living of the population, maintaining a balance between the different sectors, and monitoring the region's environmental situation to prevent the settlement from declining and going bankrupt, as extreme deficit spending gets a game over. It adds numerous features over the previous title, such as the ability of building light zones, subways, hospitals, colleges, zoos, and arcos, which are actually cities in cities. We can now give names to places, and our city is surrounded by neighboring towns, with which we can trade goods. Finally, instead of the poll in the first game, we now have the option of reading several newspapers to get an idea of our progress. The budget and finance controls are also much more elaborate. Tax rates can be set individually for residential, commercial, and industrial zones. The budget controls are very important in running the city effectively. The game also included several playable scenarios, in which, for instance, we must deal with a disaster and rebuild the city to meet a set of victory conditions. These were based in versions of real-life cities, and some were based on real events, such as the Oakland firestorm of 1991, the 1989 Hurricane Hugo in Charleston, the Great Flood in 1993 in Davenport, or dealing with the 1970s economic recession in Michigan, but also included more fanciful ones, such as a monster destroying Hollywood in 2001. If Hollywood was New York, I would assume that the monster was Bin Laden taking down the Twin Towers. Will Wright and his crew were having some sort of prediction back in 1993, I guess. SimCity 2000 was critically praised for its vibrant and detailed graphics, improved control menu, gameplay and music. Over 4 million copies were sold, and while its predecessor pioneered the city-building genre of video games, SimCity 2000 would become the model upon which subsequent urban simulators would be based over the course of the next decades.
Fury of the Furries.
Oh man, how I love Fury of the Furries! Played it first on my Amiga 500, but by the time I got my IBM PC, I also had to get a copy of the DOS version of this highly enjoyable and addictive puzzle and platform title that later, and outside Europe, was known as Back in Time. By the way, and about that name change, a collaboration with the Japanese group Namco led to the release, sometime around '94, of Fury of the Furries in other regions besides Europe, like Canada and the United States, but as said, under the name Back in Time. So for that partnership, the changes were superficial, and they only bothered transforming the main furry character into Pac-Man, the coins into pills, and remake the intro, giving it a story and objective. But enough about that. If you wanna know more, check my history video on Fury of the Furries. So, in the original and better title, we control a furry creature that has the ability to transform itself into 4 different colored forms: red, blue, green and yellow. Colors that indicates different skills that are needed at certain points during our journey across the 8 main locations present in the game: desert, lagoon, forest, pyramids, mountains, factory, village and the castle, each with 10 levels plus bonus levels. But not all forms are available in all the different levels. In those more puzzle-oriented, we may come across fields which deactivate certain powers. Besides the amazing gameplay, it also offers awesome music, graphics and even references to other video games and movies. Strange is that in the box, these creatures are known as furries and in-game as tinies. I guess that Fury of the Tinies sounded weird for some reason. As mentioned, its mechanics are centered around switching between the 4 different colors that indicates a specific special ability. The yellow form controls the elements of fire, allowing us to throw fireballs. The blue form controls the element of water, allowing the ability to swim and dive underwater, along with the power of shooting bubbles that can damage the enemies. The green form controls the element of air, allowing not only the use of a sort of grappling hook to swing across the environment, but also to pull objects. Finally, the red form controls the element of earth, offering the ability to chew across walls and ground. As said, various obstacles and enemies must be overcome along the way, and the key to success was the correct use of the right ability at the exact moment, as required. Even having this awful and at the same time strange cover art, Fury of the Furries is a masterpiece and considered as one of the best games ever made for PC. Everyone should try it, if you're in the mood for some relaxing puzzle platforming, obviously.
Day of the Tentacle.
Now here's the sequel to the title, credited for being the very first point-and-click graphic adventure. Maniac Mansion set the tone for things to come, and Day of the Tentacle was the pinnacle of craziness and weirdness in the genre. Day of the Tentacle isn't just an adventure game, it's a mix of that ingredient with comedy, strong characters, puzzles, love, and different worlds packed with different stuff. Day of the Tentacle is all that and much more.
Makes me feel great.
There's 3 different characters working together in the past, present and the future to defeat the evil purple tentacle that is trying to
Take on the world.
We control Bernard and later also Hoogie and Laverne, being able to switch between them at any time. By using the commands at the bottom of the screen, the character can pick up items, use them on other things, talk to people and more. Any of the 3 friends can also send his items across time to another friend. The game takes place in the same area, but in 3 different eras, and thus affecting history takes a vital part in some puzzles. For instance, Hooky can hide an item in the 18th century, and Laverne discovers it in the 23rd century, but by then the item may have been affected by time and changed its properties. Besides all that, there's a bit of American history depicted in this game's past that was quite complicated to come around back then, cause yeah, my teacher was more focused in Portuguese history and ancient civilizations, but hey, don't let that little bit scare you, otherwise you'll be missing out on one of the most beautiful graphic adventure games ever created that was even remastered a few years ago.
I don't want to know.
Dave Grossman returned after showing all his writing skills in The Secret of Monkey Island, and once again, and along with Tim Schafer, wrote this overwhelming story where we have to solve puzzles whilst traveling through time, exploring different periods of history in an attempt to stop the evil purple tentacle from again
Take on the world.
It was first released on floppy disks, with voice acting present only on cutscenes. That was a really complicated task to technically accomplish with success. So that you guys can have an idea, the whole game with animations, sounds and the SCUM engine is as big as this JPEG that is scrolling up the screen, that has around 8 megs. But they've managed to pull it off, and alongside the floppy release, there was also a CD-ROM version with voice acting throughout the whole game. Just like Fury of the Furries, Day of the Tentacle has also a ton of references to other video games and movies, and even to the Commodore 64, that was the computer for which the original Maniac Mansion was first released, and we can even play it inside the game on a C64 present in Weird Ed's room. Amazing!
I've lost it!
What can I say about the original Doom that hasn't been already said over and over? After Commander Keen and Wolfenstein 3D, Doom was the third major independent release by id Software. Id started developing a darker game focused on fighting demons with technology, using a new 3D game engine from the lead programmer John Carmack. The designer Tom Hall initially wrote a science fiction plot, but he and most of the story were removed from the project, with the final game featuring an action-heavy design by John Romero and Sandy Peterson. Those disputes with the Johns over the direction to take with Doom made Tom leave id Software in August of that year to join Apogee, a company that had become well renewed in the market for its highly successful shareware distribution philosophy, and as you know, came to be known as 3D Realms in later years. Tom was later the game designer for Rise of the Triad, produced Terminal Velocity, and helped in varying degrees on Duke Nukem 2 and Duke Nukem 3D as well. So id Software published Doom as a set of 3 episodes under that same Apogee-style shareware model, marketing the full game by releasing the first episode for free. A retail version with an additional episode was published 2 years later by GT Interactive as The Ultimate Doom. Doom is simply one of the best and most influential video games of all time. It immediately caught the attention of gamers thanks to its superbly atmospheric lighting effects and incredible level design. But that wasn't all. Even that initial opening humble pistol is as much iconic as the big gun 9000 and the brilliant and satisfying chainsaw. The varied enemies that are thrown at us keep the game tense and exciting, with new tactics being needed to defeat each horrific monster we come across. It was so groundbreaking and engaging that led to countless other FPSs that came after being referred to as Doom clones, and we can still feel its influence in all modern-day shooters. Doom has been converted to run on all sorts of hardware throughout the years, from computers and consoles to even ATMs and pregnancy tests. After the Can It Run Crisis Fever came Can It Run Doom, that even has its dedicated website. Doom marked, with no doubt, a significant shift in the gaming industry back in 1993 that is still being praised and felt today, over 30 years later. So guys, here you have it, the 10 games plus 20 honorable mentions released back in 1993 that I spent the most time with. Doom 2, Jazz Jackrabbit, Raptor Call of the Shadows, Warcraft. This was 1994 for DOS gamers, but bear in mind that even so, I had to leave out of this top 10 a bunch of other incredible games that I'm now gonna showcase and that you must also check out. All New World of Lemmings, Cannon Fodder 2, The Chaos Engine, Colonization, One Must Fall 2097, Desert Strike, Aladdin, The Incredible Machine 2, Micro Machines, NASCAR Racing, Pinball Dreams 2, Quarantine, Star Wars TIE Fighter, System Shock, Theme Park, Transport Tycoon, UFO Enemy Unknown, Ultima 8, Under a Killing Moon, and Wing Commander 3. All these were that close to be promoted to 1994's top 10, so consider them as honorable mentions. With that said, let's begin.
Little Big Adventure.
Little Big Adventure, that was also known as Relentless Twinson's Adventure in the US, is primarily an adventure game with strong action elements. As usually in adventure games, the protagonist must talk to other characters and collect and use objects. However, not all the problems are solved with dialogue and item manipulation. We can activate 4 different behavior modes for Twinson: normal, aggressive, athletic, and discreet. The first is used for peaceful exploration and conversations. Aggressive mode allows us to punch and kick other characters. Athletic mode must be applied when it becomes necessary to run quickly and jump. Discreet effectively puts us in a stealth mode, making it possible to sneak by hostile characters unnoticed. While activation of a particular mode is often required to solve a problem, many situations can be dealt with in different ways. The game's universe is rendered with characters in full 3D, while the environment uses isometric graphic tiles. The CD version, which was curiously released earlier than the floppy disk version, features pre-rendered animated cutscenes, audio, music, and speech, which were all absent from the floppy release. This game was meant to be made originally for the Super Nintendo, with the use of the Super FX chip. Also, in early previews, it was mentioned that Twinson would be able to drive vehicles. The final version of the game lacked this feature, but it was included in the sequel. The programmers also used some tech tricks in the Little Big Adventure, like for instance, the game's soundtrack was made of both Redbook audio and MIDI synthesizer. Also, the video mode is Super VGA for most of the game, but if we zoom, the game uses standard VGA. How about that?
Beneath the Steel Sky.
Taking place in a dystopian industrial future, what really pops out in Beneath the Steel Sky are the beautifully hand-drawn backgrounds. Talking specifically about that, its backdrops represent Union City, in the same painstaking detail as anything from LucasArts or Sierra Online. Revolution's second adventure, initially available for MS-DOS and Amiga, had a huge help from renowned British artist Dave Gibbons, also responsible for the comic book limited series Watchmen. But not only the visual beauty of this title deserves the spotlight. It's an overwhelming story, and its soundtrack is short of amazing, a complete package of pure awesomeness. Beneath the Steel Sky is a brilliant atmospheric adventure built using Revolution's virtual theater engine used in their first adventure, Lure of the Temptress, released back in 1992. This engine in particular offers a game world in which NPCs wander around rather than staying fixed in one location. In this one, we play the role of Robert Foster, along with his pet robot Joey, that also can be used to solve puzzles and upgraded with spare parts. Despite the dystopian setting, the game manages to keep things from getting too serious, mainly with dry humor from Joey, and although it lacks the overall punch of the LucasArts classics, the unfolding plot is interesting enough to keep fans of the genre adventuring on to its conclusion. It was one of the last point-and-click graphic adventures that I've played all through to the end. By then, market was shifting towards the first-person shooter revolution, and everyone was looking forward for Doom 2 that would be released 7 months after Beneath a Steel Sky, and also Star Wars Dark Forces that would arrive in 1995.
Yeah, pain. Impairment of vision? I keep seeing flying saucers.
Heretic.
Heretic goes beyond Doom in certain aspects. The engine has been enhanced with the abilities to look up and down and even fly, and wind current pushes the player often to unwanted directions. Also new is an inventory system. Many different power-ups can be collected and then be used at the correct time. These include health flasks, invisibility and invincibility upgrades, time bombs and torches to light dark rooms. The Morph Ovum transforms enemies into chickens for easier dispatching. The Wings of Wrath allows one to fly, and the Tome of Power gives all weapons a substantial upgrade. Projectiles become more powerful or split up upon impact. The Phoenix Rod becomes a flamethrower, and the gauntlets remove life force from an enemy and transfers it to the player. Heretic is the first game in the Heretic Exon franchise. It uses the engine from id Software's Doom and transplants the game's first-person shooter gameplay into a fantasy setting. Like Doom, Heretic consists of 3 distinct episodes, playable in any order, the first being available as shareware. The hunt for the Sparrow begins in the City of the Damned, continues in the alternate dimension of the Hell's Maw, and comes to an end in the Dome of the Sparrow. Every episode consists of 9 levels, one of them a hidden one. The goal in each level is to find the exit, killing everything that moves. Keys must be found and buttons pressed to advance. Enemies include gargoyles, golems, undead knights, sorcerers, Ophidian beasts and more. Most enemies exist in several varieties. Some have additional range attacks, others have ghost forms and are resistant to certain weapons. The weapon arsenal is large and varied. The basic weapons are a wooden staff and the elven wand that shoots low damage magic bullets. More powerful equipment must be found. The ethereal crossbow dispenses a spread of arrows doing high damage, but at a low firing rate. The Dragon's Claw and Hell Staff shoot in a higher frequency. The claw hits enemies instantly, the staff's energy bullets need to travel to them first. The Phoenix Rod fires explosive charges and must be handled with care. The Fire Mace unleashes steel metal projectiles that bounce across the room towards the enemy. A bare melee weapon and a wooden staff are the gauntlets of the Necromancer, which dispense deadly energy. A final word for the ambience created not only by its visuals, but also by the music and the environmental audio. Brilliant!
Raptor Call of the Shadows.
Raptor Call of the Shadows was originally developed for MS-DOS by Cygnus Studios and published by the mighty Apogee Software back in April of 1994. It was in fact placed in store shelves on April 1st of 1994, when Apogee announced to the public that Raptor would be available on that day. Everyone thought that it was an April Fool's joke, but it wasn't, and the game was supposed to be called Mercenary 2029 and not Raptor Call of the Shadows. My first experience with it was provided by a shareware version available for DOS, which included the first episode, Bravo Sector, and its music, composed by Matt Murphy, still pounds in my mind since then. The game is divided into 3 sectors: Bravo Sector, Tango Sector and Aura regions, each one composed of a total of 9 levels, and for its plot, is as basic as being sent on interplanetary missions to destroy everything that crosses our path, in this case, the Megacorps thugs. Credits and bonuses are earned by destroying stuff, and the more difficult the enemies are, the more credits and bonuses we'll get. The player has only one life, but there's an energy meter that makes Raptors stand out from most shoot-em-ups available until then. Also, a save option is available between levels that is really welcomed in this type of games. Our ship can withstand quite a huge amount of damage, always having the chance to upgrade it with shields and more powerful weapons that can be bought or collected using the credit and purchase system implemented. When facing the various types of enemies, we can dynamically switch between the weapons installed to face with the situation in hand. The more original weapons present must be the auto-tracking turrets, and besides the mega bomb that will destroy everything on screen, including enemy bullets and projectiles, there's this weapon that fires continuous instant beams capable of penetrating and destroying multiple targets in one shot. Also, we can purchase a certain item called the Ion Scanner that, when confronting a level boss, can measure its own energy and damage meter.
Blackthorn.
Blackthorn, also known as Black Hawk in some European countries, is a platform action game played from a side view with non-scrolling backgrounds. It was released both for MS-DOS and for the Super Nintendo, and its cover art was drawn by Jim Lee, a Image Comics artist by that time after rising to fame at Marvel Comics. Despite the Super Nintendo being the original release, it ended up censored in the United States and Europe and misses the blood effects when shooting prisoners, bleeding corpses, and a blood splash in the Blizzard logo and game over screen. It has certain similarities to Prince of Persia, being set in maze-like environments and focusing on exploration and occasional puzzle solving, but its inspiration came from another world and flashback, as officially stated by Blizzard's original creative team.
The idea for Blackthorn came from a couple other games
out of this world, flashback,
that were among the first to use rotoscoping. The animations are so lifelike, they're amazing.
Kyle Blackthorn Vlaros fights enemies by shooting at them. And why Kyle? Well, because the developers love Terminator, and in Terminator we have Kyle Reese, that's why. His default weapon, a pump-action shotgun, can be upgraded throughout the course of the game. Various types of bombs can be used to damage enemies, blow open doors, or destroy generators. Keys must be found to gain access to new areas. Now, talking about enemies, this was Blizzard's first game to feature that so particular orc laugh. We could soon also find in Warcraft, that curiously was released right about the same time as Blackthorn. So in this one we seek out for revenge on Sarlacc and his minions, and the gameplay involves large platforming sequences in which we can run and climb around the environment, find keys and items, and progress to the end of each maze-like level. Combat in Blackthorn takes the form of gunfights. Both Kyle and his enemies can press against walls to avoid incoming bullets. We can also fire blindly behind ourselves. As said, during the game we use a pump-action shotgun as our primary weapon. As the game progresses, Androthi allies will help us upgrade that weapon, increasing its speed and power. The game has 17 levels within 4 areas: the mines of Androth, the Karelian forests and swamps, the Wasteland Desert and Shadowkeep. As the game progresses through these areas, we become stronger and better equipped, but so do the enemies. The Sega 32X version, that arrived a year later, includes a 5th area, the Snowy Mountains, which is not found in the other versions of the game.
Warcraft, Orcs and Humans.
And staying in the Blizzard realm, Warcraft Orcs and Humans can be as addictive today as it was back when it came out in November of '94. And after I shot these images, I kept on playing it for hours. This isn't a build base, build army and destroy enemy type of RTS. There are also missions where we need to rescue friendly forces and besieged villages, being such a major breakthrough within the genre. And it was highly enjoyable to play with a friend in multiplayer mode by modem or over LAN. It was even the first RTS in history to support multiplayer capability and to have multiple resource types to harvest. After Dune 2 and before Command & Conquer, Blizzard's RTS was one of the very first on the market, and it marked the launch of what would become an increasingly accomplished series. Warcraft's setting is a fantasy realm, the once peaceful land of Azeroth. Two factions are scrapping it out for supremacy, so choose from the resourceful humans or the ruthless orcs and get ready for 24 levels of entertaining warfare, shrouded by the now well-known fog of war. It may look a little primitive by today's standards, but the gameplay is there, and the series went from strength to strength with its sequel, Tides of Darkness, that would come just a year later. The series' overwhelming success would later evolve to World of Warcraft, a MMORPG that would allow players to control their character and interact with each other around Azeroth in a high fantasy setting, something that has been consuming days and even years of online gameplay to many gamers out there since 2004.
Yes, yes, your will, yes, my lord, yes, my lord, yes, my lord, yes, my lord, my liege, yes.
Rise of the Triad. Starting life as Wolfenstein 3D Part 2, it eventually became a standalone project because id Software decided not to let another company handle their IP and cancelled the contract between both parties. Rise of the Triad shares one of Wolfenstein's original programmers, the one that left id Software during the creation of Doom, Tom Hall, as was told in my previous video in this series of best DOS games per year. So Apogee, that was also involved, initially released the shareware version that was subtitled The Hunt Begins. The full release of the game had a subtitle change to Dark War. Back to The Hunt Begins, it's a separate episode that serves as a prequel to the retail game. As Terodino Cassat, a member of the high-risk United Nations Task Force, Hunt for short, we must infiltrate the stronghold that Aloscuro's followers have established on a small island in the Gulf of Santa Catalina and shut down their operations. As the shareware episode was meant to showcase the various features of the full game, some of the enemies and obstacles encountered in The Hunt Begins actually only make their first appearance in episodes 2 and 3 of Dark War. That way, the shareware version allows to sample a substantial portion of the game's arsenal, enemy roster, items, traps and other obstacles. Enemies are mostly humans equipped with various weapons. Their attacks can be quite varied. Some of them can steal our weapons, others shoot nets that traps us. Apart from enemies, we'll be endangered by fireball launchers, rolling boulders and crushing walls. There's a lot of power-ups we can pick up. They all have various wacky effects. For example, God Mode makes us immortal and allows to toss homing, insta-death missiles. Dog Mode turns us into a dog, which can fit into small spaces and even invisible to weapons. Shrooms Mode makes everything shine with bright colors because, well, mushrooms. Elasto Mode makes us very prone to bouncing off walls when we run into them, etc. The game also offers a lot of multiplayer game modes, like Standard Deathmatch and another called Capture the Triad and so on. The graphics certainly aren't as impressive as Doom's, but it's still a fun game and even features a few neat touches that gamers hadn't seen before, like the ability to fire 2 pistols at once and also bullet holes pockmarking walls. I guess that John Woo played this game back in the day.
Jazz Jackrabbit.
Jazz Jackrabbit was a sort of Sonic game that PC gamers were looking for. An extremely fast side-scrolling platformer, a style more common to see on consoles by that time. It was developed and published by Epic Mega Games for DOS and later for Mac and for Windows. In this platform game, Jazz, the hero of the rabbit planet Kurotus, must rescue the beloved rabbit princess Ava Earlong and defeat the leader of the turtle terrorists, Devon Shell, traveling to different planets to gather clues concerning Ava's whereabouts while liberating them from Shell's tyranny. The similarity to Sonic the Hedgehog manifests itself in Jazz's uncanny speed and the fact it increases the more he runs. However, the rest of the gameplay mechanics are different. The game is primarily a shooter, meaning that in order to defeat our enemies, it's not enough for us to jump over their heads. We start with a blaster, but during the course of the game acquire other weapons, such as a grenade launcher, a flamethrower, TNT, etc. We can also pick up various power-ups, including a force shield, a hoverboard that allows us to float in the air, a bird that will fight on our side, and others. The game was originally divided into 6 episodes, with only the first one available in the shareware version, as usual. Each episode has 3 planets, with every planet itself consisting of 2 levels. The final level of every episode features a boss that we must deal with in order to complete the level, and episodes are tied by a single storyline, usually progressing after each episode is finished. As said, Jazz was inspired by games like Sonic but also Zool, and its fast-paced gameplay, beautiful graphics and amazing soundtrack was what really grabbed every single one of us that didn't own a gaming console by that time. And this was the game that we would show to our friends that had, for instance, a Genesis or Mega Drive or even a Super Nintendo. They were impressed, I can tell you that, and started to look differently at computers, cause these beasts could also be a lot of fun.
Pinball Fantasies.
As a huge fan of music in general, I always loved pinball video games, cause this genre is packed with awesome soundtracks. Developers would normally incorporate awesome tunes into these games, and that's why I absolutely love this genre, and Pinball Fantasies is still my favorite pinball video game to play on the good old Commodore Amiga and one of my favorites on DOS. The Amiga original version was released still in late 1992, only 8 months after Pinball Dreams, Digital Illusion's first pinball title and first commercial game. And just like its older brother, Pinball Fantasies offers another 4 amazing pinball tables for us to enjoy, that can be played by up to 8 players in a hot seat multiplayer type of thing. And once again, ball physics are spot on, accompanied by truly amazing graphics with gorgeous pixel art, and the music, composed by Olaf Gustafsson, is just brilliant. By the way, Olaf is one of the original co-founders of Digital Illusions that by 2005 also co-founded Epos Game Studios, responsible along with XDev and Clever Beans for the amazing Wipeout Omega collection. As said, Pinball Fantasies started as an Amiga regional title that soon got converted to DOS, Atari Jaguar, the Super NES and even the Game Boy. Its 4 themed tables are Party Land, probably the one that most people will recognize, cause it was the one featured in the shareware version, Speed Devils, Billion Dollar Game Show and Stones and Bones. The tables are larger than the ones present on Digital Illusion's previous Pinball Madness, approximately 3 screens high as opposed to 2. The tilt option is obviously present by pressing the spacebar, but you know that you can't go wild with it, don't you? It's just like in the real thing, so go gentle with it. Many would say that a pinball video game is something quite easy for a developer to accomplish, but if we think hard enough, we'll realize that all the physical components programmed in to make it realistic, like gravity and momentum, are what really makes the difference and shows how complex it can really be to create such a game based on such an apparent and simple thing like pinball. Pinball Fantasies nails it in every aspect.
Doom 2, Hell on Earth.
Again, what can be said about Doom 2 that hasn't already been said? The best action game on the PC got even better with this second installment subtitled Hell on Earth, featuring all new levels, more monsters and the legendary super shotgun. However, many said that Doom 2 seemed more of an add-on than a true sequel. And it's kind of true. And it's also kind of true that rarely has a sequel had to do so little to be successful and praised all over the place. Unlike its predecessor, which took a year to make, this game was 8 months in production. The improvements are indeed refinements, and what it basically did was experimenting, creating levels that were all one big set piece and explained to the whole gaming industry exactly what the first-person shooter genre refers to as spacing. In this sequel, the protagonist is still the same hero, the last remaining space marine. After having single-handedly saved Mars from demonic threat, he returns to Earth, only to find out that demons have already invaded it, killed most of its inhabitants or possessed them. It's now our task to bring down the force field around the last operational starport to allow the remnants of mankind to escape. Doom 2 looks and plays very similarly to its predecessor, utilizing the same 3D graphical engine with 2D sprites for enemies. The gameplay once again consists entirely of navigating the hero from first-person view through 3D environments and shooting at the demons while attempting to find a way out by flipping switches and looking for keys. Unlike in Doom, which is divided into 3 episodes, the 30 levels of this game plus the 2 secret levels form that big set piece I mentioned before, creating a sort of single and long episode. Doom 2 was the first game to be rated by the ESRB, as its predecessor naturally inspired it due to all the controversy that surrounded its creation. In fact, the commercial boxed version of the original Doom was placed in store shelves after Doom 2. Yeah. So guys, here you have it. The 10 games plus 20 honorable mentions released back in 1994 that I spent the most time with. Tell me down in the comments section which games have you played, and feel free to share your personal favorites from that particular year. I would love to know, cause I'm positive that I'll discover a ton more just by reading your feedback. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this episode, you know the drill. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in my next video. Cheers!